All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The webinar will start soon. If you would, please introduce yourself in the chat. What's your name, where you may be joining from, and then throughout the webinar, please take time to do whatever you need in order to keep to care for yourself. We want to make sure that people are as comfortable as possible, as we are hopefully having a great discussion about how we can make sure that we're activating in the community. If you're just joining us, this is our fifth edition of Engage and Adapt. And we're really looking forward to getting started here in just 1 minute. Mm-mm-mm. We have Courtney Brooks, who is going to be monitoring our chat. So please feel free to make sure to introduce yourself, and then we'll get going right at the strike of 7. I should have been like you, Bonnie, and gotten some coffee, but I'm 1 hour ahead, so I figured it'd be a bad idea if I want to sleep tonight.
I was just texting Bonnie about I wanted to make tea, but I have water.
I have my tea.
All right. So once again, this is our fifth edition of Engage and Adapt. It's a space where we practice lifting our voices in advocacy and our hands in help. We want to make sure that we're getting a bit of both and talking to experts in both. All right. So again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as we continue to go throughout our webinar tonight. Um, I myself, my name is Chad Stanton. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I'm currently living in Washington, D.C., and I'm serving as the political director here at Sojourners Social Action. And I'm really excited about our conversation tonight. Really excited to have folks joining and engaging with us. And learning, sorry, excuse me, and learning more about what's happening, particularly in Houston, but nationally, with folks who are Black migrants. So one thing we want to make sure we emphasize is that we're moving in community amid chaos. We're responding to community needs and hunger with, collective care, collective action. We want to make sure that we are centering that and grounding that in our work. So one of the guests I'm here with today is Bonnie Okoth, who currently lives in Houston and is a community organizer for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And I'm going to go ahead and let them talk a little bit more about themselves.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome all. I'm glad to be here. My name is Bonnie Okoth. I'm originally from Nairobi, Kenya, but I live in Houston, Texas, and I am the organizer for BAJI, which is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And as an organizer, we uplift, we engage, and educate the Black communities and the African American through outreach, advocacy, and organizing.
Thank you, thank you. And then I'll leave the floor for Monti Hill.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Monty. I go by she, her. I'm also from Texas. I'm from San Antonio, but I currently live in Houston, Texas. And I am the organizer for the Texas Black Migrant Ecosystem. It's a small but mighty group. It was birthed out of BLMP's mission to support more Black migrants in the state of Texas. And there's about I want to say there's 9 organizations, but there's a lot of people, but 9 organizations that currently are involved with supporting Black migrants in the mission of storytelling and advocacy and organizing.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Thank you all both for joining us. And so, yeah, now I was going to say a little bit more about the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. They educate and engage, as Bonnie said, the Black and Black immigrant communities to organize and advocate for racial, social, and economic justice. And I'm very familiar with the work. I've done some partnerships with them in my previous job, so really excited about the conversation tonight. And then the Texas Black Migrant Ecosystem Project is again collaborative comprised of politically aligned community members, leaders, and organizations committed to prioritizing and addressing the power building needs of Black immigrant and migrant communities across Texas. So both of these organizations are doing critical work in an area that I think is often overlooked. And so the conversation tonight should be pretty fruitful. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. After more than a year of the Trump administration, we've seen so many black communities being targeted, in particular, Somalis in Minneapolis, Haitian folks in Ohio.
I
I
know.
wanted to ask just the most basic question of how have these policies and some of this rhetoric impacted some of the work that you all are doing?
Mm. Do you want to go first, Bonnie? You want me?
You can go first, that's fine.
Okay. I will say first, because what I'm taught through a lot of these like workshops and movement building spaces, this isn't new. And this isn't just since Trump or the administration, since 2019. This has been going for a long time. These systems are harmful and they're designed to be harmful. And I do think when it comes to targeting particular groups and how has it impacted our work, um, I know it's a mixture of folks are organizing in deeper spaces. They are going possibly underground to go to more levels of organizing strategy and power building. And there's some groups that work with directly impacted folks, so they're not necessarily, they can't go out in community. So I would say, not speaking for them, but I just see and observe is it's hard, but I do think that there's power in resilience in a lot of these spaces. Um, I think the work, particularly when I'm going through, as far as like organizing, since we work at the intersection of the criminal legal system and immigration with a lot of these organizations that are in TBME, it's trying to galvanize the Black audience and Black people who are directly impacted by systems of harm, and letting them know that it's not too shy, it's not too far away from what's going on immigration wise and the policy and things like that. So um, that's how I've been impacted by this in that space, and also working with the groups. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Monty. I'll go next. For us, we have definitely had to re-strategize because of the new policies and the impact it has had on the communities. So, firstly, what we have done is we've decided to engage the communities more, and by doing this, we're going to the communities because people are now afraid to come out, as opposed to years back where we do still have in-person meetings, but now we have to go to the people. And then we are now doing a lot of virtual meetups so that we can keep them engaged and informed. There has also been an increase of know your rights trainings because we realize many of our people do not know how to navigate in this climate that we are right now. So we also have done a lot of translation so that we can meet the people where they are, because not everybody is able to speak English. So we are going to the communities, looking for the community leaders, ensuring that the community leaders are in touch, we are in touch with them so that we can take the word to the people. We also have offered a lot of legal resources to them so that they do not have to go out and seek this help, and we can take to them and help them know what they need to do in this current political situation that we are in.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you all had a couple of things in your answers that I kind of wanted to dig in a little bit more on. Monty, when you mentioned that these things aren't new, one of the things that I'm recalling is that one of the images from the Biden administration was images of people at the Border Patrol on the border running down Haitian migrants on horseback with
Mhm.
lassos and ropes and things of that nature. And so I understand it has to be tough in this current environment in order to kind of convey the continuity of some of these policies while still conveying like the escalation that we're seeing as well. How do you balance that tough task?
Um, I think workshops like this, I think workshops or gatherings that keep you in action, that keep you, uh, I think sometimes with these systems, these harmful systems, because again, they've been here. I think again, they're designed to keep us still stagnant and in fear and in movement building, particularly on the immigration side. Things were coming out rapidly around that, but they always do. Like it's very urgent. And that's their tactic. They release information about policy change on a Friday. This person or these organizations are they have to deal with it all weekend, strategizing, and then Monday they release new information, and then that week it's just like a cycle. I think workshops help. I think keeping in community, what Bonnie was saying, some of the know your rights have changed, so making sure that you know what type of information is out there. Are you part of any groups? You Some groups you do have to get vetted because it's just
Yeah.
where we're at right now, just for safety reasons. But there's private groups, there's like WhatsApp or Signal groups. I know that a lot of our immigrant communities are still on WhatsApp and Facebook, but there is safety in communication, not necessarily digitally, but if folks are in your community, um, asking folks where the next meeting is. Sometimes we do have to show up in person. Sometimes we can't. So asking folks if they have the Zoom call or if you can talk via phone. I think that's how we're trying to be organized in this space. Yeah. If
That's
that
awesome.
answers your question.
Yeah, no, of course. And then Bonnie, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you all are going out into the community more, right? And making sure
Yes.
that the information is getting to the people as they need it in the way that they can best understand it while making sure it's translated and things of that nature. And so I wanted to talk about how some of your how you all came across your community centered approach, and how folks have responded to the way in which you've reached out and tried to work really collaboratively in a real collaborative manner with them in community.
It's good you've asked that question because right now, as Monty has said, there's a lot. People have a lot of fear, so they're going to people who they trust. So when we talk of people who they trust, like for me, I'm Kenyan, so I approach the Kenyan community, the leaders, and the community already knows the leaders, so they feel this is a trusted source. That's one way what we are doing. So we target the cultural community leaders. The other way we're doing it is through the church. We're going to the churches that are like I've been to the church that I have that I go to, and we speak to the priest or the pastor, and we relay them. So the priest is like a go-between, a person who they already are in communication with and trust, rather than me just approaching them blindly. Because right now nobody knows who is their friend, who is not their friend. So when you get, that's why we are doing what we're calling the mutual aid, to bring people who they already know into the space, train them, and we go out as part of that training, so they know that this is an ally of ours, not an enemy.
That's awesome. Y'all are great guests because you're leading me right into my next questions. But also I want to make sure to stop and acknowledge Gloria and Cindy. Gloria from Pittsburgh, Cindy from Kannapolis, North Carolina. Please, folks, feel free to continue to drop your information there in the chat. And we're going to move to our next question, which is we like to center faith as a key factor in caring for others and moving to action. And how has your faith informed your work? As you kind of mentioned, Bonnie, so I'll let you go ahead and start first.
Oh, that I love this question because one of the things I'm very special. I love my faith, and I everything I do, I base it on my faith. And one of the things I do know is written in the Bible: your people die because of lack of knowledge. So I always ensure that whatever knowledge I do know have, I impact it to the next. I teach the next person, because we're trying to ensure the communities are empowered, are educated, because if you do not know what to do, you're not able to defend yourself. So while practicing my faith, knowing that I need to go out there, as opposed to just keeping all this knowledge to myself. I need to ensure that I spread it out to as many people who need it as much as I can. So that is exactly what I do, and ensure that I keep continuing to let them know that I'm coming from a good place. I'm coming from a place of compassion as opposed to the administration. So they know that I am their friend as I go along my walk.
That's amazing. And I really appreciate the way that your faith doesn't lead you to simply, pray for folks to be better or hope that folks are better, right? But you see and say like, hey, I have this information, I have this resource that I have to share with people as a part of my faith. And I think that's a really, really important thing and key thing that I like to lift up here. Monty, I'm gonna put you on the spot. How has your faith informed your work as well?
I think the deeper the pressure, I guess, of policy change becomes, living in the thick of it, and then also being friends and close to directly impacted folks, I think it just gets stronger. I do think faith, uh, we're seeing in the prompter, moving in action. I'm in Texas, and Texas has become so, they've changed the narrative and the storytelling of like faith and spirituality, and um, it has been very right wing and very harmful, and people are scared to express themselves. And also, sanctuary spaces here in Texas have become harmed, and people are getting threatened. And I've been in movement building spaces with tons of immigrants here who have use sanctuary, like churches and things for seeking asylum, for support. There's with BLMP, there's a lot of Black migrants who are gender fluid, and it's important that churches still, and I hope that they could still honor that action and movement by putting up a pride flag and putting in their sermon and their speeches that everybody's welcomed here. And I think it has restored because we're seeing what's going on in churches in Texas. Um, uh, but yeah, it's only gotten deeper, and also I try to like not let systems change affect what I'm seeing with my friends like Bonnie, and how close they are spiritually with the rituals that they show me when I go to their house or their gatherings. And I just try to be open and just know that it's it's something greater in movement building. So yeah.
No, that's awesome. And again, you're leading me right into my next question of what are some of the spiritual practices that you've used to keep yourself grounded in this moment?
Um, I was telling Bonnie yesterday, I know for me, like I mentioned, I'm in organizing, but my passion is like marketing and communications and all things weird tech stuff. So I understand how when they release information on a Friday or a Thursday, and you're just like, oh my God, doomsday. And then the weekend you're dwelling with all of this where it's supposed to be kind of like a liberation. Like the weekend is for me. And then Monday they have like a press conference, and then the cycle goes on, and then they do it again on Friday. I've been kind of focused on uh, culturally Japanese tea in the morning. I know
Hmm.
in the morning, I like to just have some me time journal. A lot of the things that we're seeing or reading, or experiencing as organizers, or directly impacted folks, it can harm us in like a different way. And some of this, again, it's not new, but it's new to our bodies. So how we react, um, we just need to take it slow, and be mindful that everybody globally is being affected by a lot of things. And so I just try to do that, journaling, being with friends. Bonnie, we just celebrated her birthday 2 weeks
Oh, happy
ago.
birthday.
Um, yeah, just trying to be more with community and friends and family, and trying to center those spaces and all the things that they're doing. because people are still having kids, still people are still creating, people are still living and loving. So yeah, those are practices that I try to keep.
That's awesome. How about yourself, Bonnie?
Okay. I first and foremost always have my personal prayers, which I don't take for granted. I wake up in the morning and I must pray for the day, for whatever I'm going to do. That one I take it very seriously. The other thing I do is I'm always involved in church activities. Like especially this is a very spiritual season for us because it's the Easter, the Lenten season. So I I am involved in the church activities. Then again, I do a lot of reflection. I do meditate, and I do have a lot of quiet time, and I
Mm,
read. The other thing is I involve myself with my family and ensure I talk to them at least because none of my family is here. So every other day I must speak to one member of my family just to
mm,
keep in touch and keep my spiritual space growing as well.
mm,
That's awesome. So,
mm.
yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. We have a couple of questions here in the Q&A, but really quickly, I'd be remiss if I did not ask you, Monty, to explain to a lot of folks who may be listening who may not understand what the BLMP may be. I know,
Oh.
but we've just been using the acronym.
Yeah, so for the folks out there that are new to Texas Black Migrant Ecosystem, it was birthed, as I mentioned before, through the vision. It was a collective group. BAJI is part of the group. We Dream in Black, and BLMP stands for Black LGBTQIA Migrants Project. What was happening with the Haitians down at the border in Del Rio? Obviously, it was seen national, them being whipped, and a collective group of Black-led organizations, even grassroots was down there as well. They ended up coming together. I was actually a volunteer. I signed up. They sent out a basically like a call to action, like who's
Yes.
who's willing to. Yeah, Bonnie was there, who's willing to come and participate and just have like a strategy session. And so BLMP worked with organizers and a consultant to help us take all the things that we're experiencing mentally and put it out on paper and strategize the next couple months. And then it's just turned into, we've been active for 3 years.
Yes.
3 years. But yeah, it was through that BLMP. Hopefully they're on this call, but if they're not, you can find them at BLMP on like social. They are powered by the Transgender Law Center, and yeah, they're doing amazing work as well with advocating for folks and policy change and things like that. So yeah, that's how we were created.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I wanted to make sure to mention that because again, I think very often when people think about immigration or they think about racism or they think about homophobia, they can or they think about misogyny. They think of these things as like separate issues, right? That are in these different silos when people live at the intersections of them all, right? And have to navigate that in a way. Um, that can present some challenges that people simply can't see when they keep them separate in their minds.
Mhm,
Um, so I wanted to make sure to raise that.
mhm, mhm.
All right. So what would you say to people looking to take action in this moment as, organizers?
I
Mhm.
would,
Monica.
okay. It- the first and foremost thing is join them. If you need to have your voice heard, by keeping quiet, you're not going to be able to empower ourselves. And the more we are, the better, the larger our voices are. So join the movement, join a community that's around you, that's near you. I don't know if this would be a good time for us to say that Baji has actually launched what we call a stop campaign, and it's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to break the narrative that is separating the ICE from the police because basically what STOP is it's an acronym for Stop Taking Our People. It's we are fighting against the ICE raids that are ongoing. And so we have launched a campaign that is trying to break this machine.
Yeah. Monty, how about yourself?
Yeah, along with the Stop campaign, there's I would say for folks, again, I've been in like digital organizing spaces, and so organizing it's in all of us, whether you're behind the scenes or just a new person trying to get involved. There's a group out there. I would encourage you to find them on social. If you're not already connected with the group, I would do more action versus taking in the knowledge or receiving information or just resharing or posting on digital or socials like that. Action is the best thing that could help exercise your brain to understand how to rapidly respond if somebody is in a crisis. Because any of us could be harmed by systems, and we are directly harmed by systems. As we saw in Minnesota, what happened to the organizers out there. And if you want to take action too, I would also encourage you to listen to the folks that are in the movement building spaces. There's a lot of directly impacted folks that know what's going on and that could help you galvanize different missions or projects or anything like that. I would encourage you to listen to what they have to say, take note before you act or move, because I can be like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that advice to make sure to, take a breath, listen, figure out what's actually needed before you decide, like, I'm going to, save everybody or pitch in here,
I know.
or do my
I
thing.
only say that because we do work. We can't, um, when folks go down to the border, not everybody can go with us to do border organizing because not everybody can, because they will get directly stopped by ICE. But there's other ways that they can go. So that's the reason why. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think one thing I really like about the Stop campaign is the way in which you all frame, um, the different agencies and policing agencies as the body snatchers rather than trying to separate each out as this one is worse than the other and really trying to connect those systems together. So I really encourage folks to really check out the campaign. I think it's a really critical intervention in this moment in time as people are continuing to use rhetoric and like oh, we thought they were only going to get the worst of the worst, or we thought they were only going to target the criminals, without really too much consideration as to how that contributes to some of the carceral logic that has brought us to this current moment. So I definitely want to lift that up, and then I also want to make sure to lift up the Know Your Rights work that you all are doing, as it's very critical as well.
Yes, thank you so much.
No, of course. All right, and so my next question before I think we get into the Q&A from the audience, and again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat and we will make sure to get to them. What are some of the biggest lessons you've taken away from your work so far, in this moment in time?
Oh, one of the biggest lessons I've learned right now is that we cannot stop because there's a serious need for what we are doing. And just like Monty and I and yourself cannot do it, we need everybody involved. Everybody has to get involved in this in this movement, and then we need to be able to impact more knowledge because there's again people do not know what to do when things are especially right now, so we have to keep on impacting that knowledge to everybody. And then the other thing is I've learned that the community is really in a there's that there's that low side right now that people, because a lot of people are not able to live how they normally are living. People are scared to go outside right now. People are afraid to continue doing the work they were doing because they're afraid of the ice raids. So there's a need for people to take care of their mental state, as Monty talked about, because when people are not able to work, that means they're not able to financially take care of themselves plus their families. So there's a lot of suffering going on in the community.
Yeah.
You, Bonnie. Um, I think the biggest lesson that I've taken from organizing and this work recently, what's going on, um, there's a huge amount of privilege in some of the work that I do. And um, like again, like how I mentioned about going to the border, um, I can get up and move, and I have access to do those things. And it's also uh, put me in a mindset of how my fatigue is it's very it's nothing compared to what people are experiencing. And just we had a call last week, and somebody had mentioned what was happening in Iran, and um, folks that are going into hiding with what's going on right now, specifically Black migrants. Um, I think that is the lesson that I try to be mindful of every day is just showing up to different spaces, learning as much as I can, um, understanding how I could organize in a different way, and again, that's it. That's just learning something different in these spaces, in these movement building spaces.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so we had a couple of questions from, oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to what Monty is saying that currently what we also need to do is listen to what the community wants, talk to
Mhm.
them, get down, have a deeper understanding of what they want, and prioritize what the issues that they're going through right now. You could be thinking it's one thing, but what they're feeling down is what they're feeling on the ground is very different.
Mhm.
So at the same time, we help to empower them through direct action, advocacy, and just space building. So definitely learning, listening to them and understanding their needs and bringing them together is very important.
Mhm.
You know, I think that's really important. Quite often we can get really excited with, have read all these books. I've, heard from all these speakers. I've read all these articles. I think I know the deal, XYZ, and really want to like jump in and show people that we care about, showing our knowledge and showing, we studied and XYZ and all of that is great. You do want to make sure that you're coming in as prepared as possible, but you also have to make sure that you're understanding that you're coming in with a different
Mhm.
life experience, positionality as folks who are in the room. And so no matter how much you may have studied, it is very important to keep both of your ears open and close your one mouth, as they say. Have two
Mhm.
versus one. Awesome, awesome.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, you can say as
Oh,
many things as you like, Monty.
okay. We're currently building in TBME, it's like a safety communication, and all groups have these. Like y'all's group probably has one, when stuff goes down, here's how we're going to communicate. But we are trying to pivot and trying to do more collaborative. And there's a lot of voices, how you mentioned who's in the room and making sure we just don't react, and like how Bonnie said, keeping people safe. We keep us safe. Um, and I think that's what I've also been taking away over the last few weeks, because it has been challenging to get different groups and committees together to form how are we going to communicate if this happens, or what is a strategy to share this information digitally versus sharing this information internally. So yeah, there's so many lessons. There's so many lessons.
Yeah. And I think one thing to also emphasize is that you don't have to know everything going in, right? I think very often people get intimidated by the idea that, if I go into this space and I don't know everything, and if I don't say everything the right way, then people, won't like me, or I'll fail within that space. And I think it's important to know and understand within organizing spaces that we're all learning, growing, and building power and agency together. So that, hopefully folks aren't as, shy about jumping in, if we can keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to,
Oh, sorry. I was just going to share the group that has helped with the conversation, Vision Change Win, if y'all haven't heard of them.
okay. Yeah,
They're
no.
free. Anybody could sign up and they have meetings with you.
Yeah. And we'll make sure to share that in our resources for our post-webinar email as well. So Vision Change Win.
Mhm.
All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so I'm going to jump into the questions here in the Q&A from Tony. With all the things vying for our attention in the season, how are you distinguishing signal from noise? What practices would you recommend to separate the good things from the God things that He has called to us? He has called us in this season.
Mhm. Um, Noise can show up with, I'm just going to go back to how we receive information. Um, and is this information factual? Is it true? How is the community being harmed? Sources, when you're getting information online or getting an article or anything like that, just make sure that um, it's 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 coming from a place of like, okay, this person said this. It's not just clickbait or anything like that. Because I do think folks can go into their personal bias and start reflecting, and they could start sharing information. And that is not what the community needs to hear right now. And I'm pretty sure um, it's not good information to share that rapidly with a community that has been hearing doom information for weeks at a time. So that's just one that I can think of. I don't know about you, Bonnie.
I would say, especially when it comes to anything to do with policy, ensure it comes from a trusted source, from a legal expert, and not from somebody who said something, or especially social media has all sorts of things. So ensure that whatever you're hearing or listening to and taking in is coming from a respected legal resource.
Hmm.
Thank you. And then our next question, also from Tony, states that Dr. Stacey Patton states that the behavior we're seeing from this administration and those who support it are driven by fear and not power. How would you respond to this?
Yeah, it's fear mongering. Um, it's you. I feel like it's used to keep people still, and the word I used earlier was stagnant. Um, no change, like you can't speak up, having folks that feel silence during policy change, harmful policy changes when it comes to um, folks' body, autonomy on their body, on their education. We have a lot of um, folks who work in the domestic working area when it comes to Black immigration, specifically for where we dream in Black. There's a lot of folks in the domestic area, and so folks are scared to go to work. Like that's their livelihood. And then there are folks that are still show up during this policy change. So yeah, I definitely think it's used towards fear. It's not used like I don't even think people understand what the Constitution is. I think they're just making stuff up every time they go to that podium. But we're talking about this. Um, but yeah, that's what I'll leave it as, or I'll rant.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fear being peddled out there, and of course, by also seeing what we're seeing happening, that draws in a lot of fear, and people take conclusions out of what they see without verifying, and that's
Yeah.
why coming into spaces like this, coming into organized groups where people are having real conversations, is very important for you to know differentiate the truth from what you're hearing. I'll take a case in point is where in one of the workshops gatherings I was in, everybody was fearing to, though even those who are American citizens were fearing to travel back to their country because they had had rumors that people were being stopped at the airport with no clarification. And then we had a lawyer, a lawyer in the group who actually dispelled that rumor and said, no, as long as you have your proper documentation, you will and should not be stopped at the airport. But it's if you open the social media right now, everyone is fearing to go back home because they will not be let back in. But that is all things they've just heard and not verified. So it's
Yeah.
very important to keep attending such workshops where the actual legal people who know the policies and know what is going on and be informed all the time of the different policy changes that are happening.
Amigos call too is every
Yes.
week. It's a huge group of folks that can share information and they share it pretty rapidly. Like what you hear either on a weekend or what's going on, you have a bunch of folks in the group that can say, "Oh, this is fake, this is real." There were even folks talking during the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I think not to cut you off, Bonnie, but yeah, tons of information trying to make sure that it's factual.
Yeah, and if you are a community organizer, a religious leader, or someone who cares about these issues, who's working within an organization, there is the Amigos call that you can join weekly. Reach out to myself, Monty. Well, reach out to myself. I won't volunteer Monty or Bonnie, and we can see if you would
I
be
was
able
like, you know
to.
more than me.
Yeah, we'll see if you'll be able to join that call. And then one thing I do want to say about fear is that fear is dangerous. And it could be dangerous on both ends, right? From the people who are being targeted, but also the people who are doing the targeting, right? They are doing this out of a fear of losing some sort of imagined status, imagined power that they may have. And while they may be afraid, that does not mean that it's not also dangerous at the same time. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind that even particularly as we see people get more and more desperate within the administration, then we're going to see them try and do more and more dangerous things. And I think we've seen a little bit of an example of that with what's happening in Iran. So it's something I think we have to hold in our minds together. Um, all right. Let me see if there are any more questions. If not, we're going to run through some of the latest things that's been happening in the news and also some of the principles that we want to make sure people are walking away with. Um, Monty, Bonnie, while we're doing so, please feel free to jump in at any time to add any points that you think may be relevant. We just want to make sure people are getting as much information as possible, as well as feeling empowered in agentic in the way that they're moving. That
Awesome.
sound
Thank
good?
you. Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So one thing we want to make sure to remember, we mentioned this at the beginning of our series, that mutual aid is not charity, right? It's a collective coordination to meet each other's needs, usually from awareness that the systems we have in place are not going to meet them as they are, right? So we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of this in action in Minneapolis and other places that are targeted by places like ICE and Border Patrol, where people, again, cannot go to work, when people are afraid to, and as a result of that, they can't pay their rent and they can't make sure they get food. And so people are coming together in order to make sure that they can meet their needs collectively. And so we want to make sure that people have and draw that distinction between mutual aid and charity. While there is a place for charity, it is like people definitely need charity, particularly in these tough times. We want to make sure that people are moving and understanding clearly the difference between the two. Uh, I'll pause there for any comments, questions, concerns. Folks in the Q&A. Again, please feel free to talk in the chat. Please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll make sure to try and answer them as fully as possible. And so, once again, asking folks to share in the chat, what forms of mutual aid has your faith community done so far? We'll stop here for about 5 minutes or so because we don't, maybe 2 or 3 minutes because we do not have a ton of time.
I know BAJI, they are not faith-based, but they did mutual aid
Yes.
came to food. I know there was a huge issue with folks not receiving their food stamps last couple weeks ago. And they organized from Miami to Houston to Atlanta. I'll let you talk, Bonnie, but yeah.
Yes, we did. We did that. It actually came out of the point that the, as we said, there were not people are not receiving their food stamps, and it was actually during the Thanksgiving season, and we looked and said, how best can we assist our communities? And as you said, it's not out of charity, so we did a food drive here and it was at our local church, one of our local churches here, and there was a huge turnout. It was very, very well received, and at the same time, we were able to hand out the KYR cards and our information and our legal resources. So, apart from assisting them with the food aid, we also gave them resources and we also empowered them.
Mm.
That's awesome. And that, oh, my bad. Go ahead, Monty.
Oh, I was going to say, particularly health for mutual aid. I know here in Houston, there might be in other spaces too. I'm interested to learn more, but I know the Harris County area, ICE has been heavily in Harris County. And I know we went to a meeting where they said they were going to support with free screenings, free dental screenings, HIV or STI screenings. And they also said, please don't call this or call this number if you don't want to come in, because a lot of folks are encouraged to come in person before they call to see who's at the door. So I thought that was thoughtful of them too.
Yeah, no, that's really dope. One thing Bonnie, that you also mentioned that I want to make sure to mention is that tomorrow the Circle of Protection is having a webinar around the changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which
Mhm.
includes cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, and that's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to make sure to mention it at the end, but just understanding how the disruption to food aid has really, really impacted communities both here and abroad. I think it'll be really a really good conversation for folks to join. Um, yeah, and then one thing I want to make sure to mention is, as a former mutual aid here in DC, when we had the National Guard come out and the surge of federal policing, we had folks in the faith community make sure to come out and support and care for folks in our communities without housing, as those folks were being explicitly named as targets to some of that direct action. And so we just wanted to make sure that folks were as protected and knew their rights and had the resources they need here as well. And so those are different ways in which you can kind of get involved in mutual aid within your community. All right. So we understand that when systems tremble, the faithful build together. And that's what we want to make sure we're doing here. And so really quickly, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk through some of the things that are happening ongoing in our news. So the Department of Homeland Security is continued under their partial shutdown. We've seen lines at so TSA agents are now not getting paid. I do want to make sure to mention that there was or an offer on the table to make sure TSA did get funded during the partial shutdown that was rejected by the majority party in Congress. But if you are looking to travel this week, then you may have some trouble with lines being like 4 to 5 hours in some places. So I just want to make sure to mention that as folks are continuing to call, and we continue to have our action alert to get ICE out of Minneapolis and all other communities. And so we want to make sure that folks are aware and cognizant as we continue to kind of try and make sure there's no additional funding for ICE. The war with Iran. began it began over about a week or so ago, and it's continuing. Trump and the Trump administration is continuing to give um, differing explanations for their actions. And as we're continuing to see the fallout from regional strikes from Iran itself, as well as closing the Strait of Hormuz, which will raise gas prices. Um, and so we also have an action alert calling on folks to demand that the members of Congress assert their war powers, their Article 1 war powers. And we're going to continue and also pivot towards making sure that they don't vote for any additional supplemental funding for the war in Iran. Job loss. In February, we saw a revision to the job numbers. So we actually saw job losses over the last couple of months. Um, it's tough in the economy right now, particularly as social services are being cut with, SNAP, Medicaid, the things that people need, housing first, the things that people need in order to make sure that they can survive. And so this news is another bad sign for the economy, but also a critical point to emphasize the importance of mutual aid and the faith community and helping people meet their needs in this time of need. Um, uh, in particular, we've seen a lot of folks who work for the federal government, particularly Black women, being laid off, and want to make sure we're continuing to show up and support as people are struggling with struggling with job loss. Um, please go ahead, Monty.
No, I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
Hmm.
We're also seeing food instability deepening. Um, and this is related to both the one above it and job loss and the one under with immigrants under targeted stress. Folks aren't able to go to work. Either they don't have a job or they're being targeted if they try to try to go to work. And it makes it so that it's hard for them to put food on their table, and rent on the table as well. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. We also understand that churches and food banks are under strain with so much demand, and so we want to make sure that folks are reaching out to not only their federal congressperson, but their state congressperson to kind of let them know that hey, we need you all to kind of budget in these resources. We need SNAP. We need to make sure that people have the ability to either pay their rent or not get evicted as they're being targeted as they try to go to work and live their daily lives.
Mhm.
Good things though, communities are coming together. We're seeing communities join and form, mutual aid societies, groups to protect and know each other's rights, groups to protect and watch out for each other. And so we want to make sure that people remember that and understand that people are working every day in every place in order to try and combat these things. And they're waiting for you in any way, in shape, form, or capacity that you may have. We've definitely been seeing church leaders lead the way in a lot of the activism and organizing we've seen on the ground, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in Georgia, in Florida, all over the country. We're seeing people, not only Christians, but we're also seeing Jewish folks and Muslim folks really step forward in order to be leaders in their communities and put their bodies on the line for their communities. I already kind of mentioned the increasing layoffs and economic insecurity, so we're going to skip that, and that's not as positive as the last two. Um, and so again, we talked about Congress negotiating reforms, states assessing their ability to fund SNAP and Medicaid, and then considering additional funding for the war in Iran. We want to make sure that, if you are talking to Congress people, if you're writing an op-ed, if you were, just talking to people within your community, that, you're understanding the current circumstances, and please, please, please feel free to reach out to myself if, you want any guidance, any messaging, around those particular issues. All right.
Hi, I'm George. I'm up here with H-Con Pest Control. I've been talking to the neighbor.
It's Bonnie.
All right. No, it's all good. So just really quickly, we're going to ask as we leave, we're going to, ask you what you will do in your community. We're also going to send out a survey, some things that you can do in order to take action. Oh. All right. So things you can do in order to take action. Publicly use your voice. So things like op-eds, things like sermons, things like hey, if you know a office holder, giving them a call and saying, hey, these are my thoughts on the subject. These are things that people are concerned about. I think could be really important. Bridging Divides is another webinar we're going to be having this week with being led by Moya Harris that is designed to kind of help people get across some of those differences that they may experience and understand. So we're going to encourage folks to join that. Again, the Circle of Protection is also having a webinar tomorrow around the One Big Beautiful Bill Act,
Mhm.
in order to kind of help people navigate and understand what's going on there. Mighty Networks is our online space for people to continue to hold these conversations. And we're going to make sure to share the Stop campaign in our post-webinar email so that people can make sure to join and support BAJI in their work there, as it's a very critical campaign.
Mhm.
So any last words, any last questions from the audience? I'm going to throw it to hold on really quickly from the chat.
Okay.
Oh, oh, Monty, thank you for dropping some resources in the chat as well. We'll try to make sure to include them in our post event email as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say, taking action. The Nigerian Center is hosting something as well during the Congressional Black Caucus. There was a huge pressure from Black-led immigrant groups to apply pressure to the Black Caucus, and they're going to host an action on the 28th. I can also send that to you too, Chad, but they're also in DC. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I definitely be happy to share.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. How about yourself, Bonnie? Any last words? You're on mute.
Sorry, I would like everyone to just join the Stop campaign so that we can join the movement and fight this thing together.
Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. I really want to thank you all for joining me. I know it's a little bit later there in Texas than work hours. But I understand and appreciate you all are doing really, really important work. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank y'all
Um,
too.
yeah, no, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're going to close out and everyone make sure you have a good day and be on the lookout for our follow-up email.
All right. Bye, y'all.